And we are live. Energy Week show, podcast, extravaganza. Ryan Ray, as always, along with the good muted Dr. Ellen Wald. How you doing, Doctor?
Thank you for reminding me to unmute my microphone. Everything is excellent.
Oh, is it? Is it?
Is it?
Is it?
If you say it is, it will be.
I
That's what my
think,
grandmother always said. She says, "Wake up and just say it's going to be a good day."
yeah,
So
there's a saying, some football coach, and he used to say, you can have a great day if you want to, or something like that. And I always thought that's a good thing. But anyways, no, it's not bad. It's I saw a chart I don't know, maybe a month ago, 2 weeks ago, talk about it's the hottest summer in the history of summers. It really hasn't been that bad here in Texas. I mean, it's hot, but last summer was brutal. It's not that bad where we're at. Is it bad there?
no. Oh, it's been like the weirdest, coldest summer since I think I've lived in North Florida.
Yeah.
I mean, like May and June were cool and rainy. I don't think it got to 90 degrees at all. Even July, it was still really rainy. That's when the humidity really sets in.
Mm.
But it's still like we're used to having days where it's like 95 every day, and I don't think it's really gotten much above 90. Now it's still really hot. Like, I mean, when it's 99 or 90% humidity and it's 90, is that really all that difference between 90 and 95? So it's still hot, but it's not like it has been. It was definitely a cooler summer in Florida and a lot of rain, which is not a bad thing. We're actually supposed to get a lot of rain.
Oh, yeah, I'm definitely not complaining about what's going on. I just would tell my wife the other day, it's been hot some days, but it's been pretty good all things considered. Um, and here we are getting ready to go into September, so maybe we'll turn the corner and go into fall here by the end of the month, and things be trucking along lovely. Okay, all right, much to discuss. We have the gas buddy himself coming on the podcast here in about 25 minutes, so let's cover some ground before then. From our good friends at Reuters, who now you can only read one article a month.
Okay, but you need there's a secret. Okay, I finally figured this out. You just have to register like your email address on the site, and then you can read all the articles, basically.
Oh, so you really don't have to pay. It's just
it's just like they want your info. So give them your info, and then you can read what you want. It's not like Bloomberg where you really can't read. Yeah. So
all right, I'll give you my email at some point, Reuters. But until then, all up session off session highs after Ida OPEC. God, these headlines sometimes. OPEC Plus looks to boost output. I haven't looked at the price this afternoon. What was WTI like 68 this morning?
Yeah, it's like 69 now, and Brent is like 72, almost 73. So, it's interesting. Oil was definitely, I think, up heading into the hurricane, especially because I think they closed like almost like, what was it, 1.74 million barrels a day of production in the Gulf of Mexico was shut. So, that makes sense. I mean, it'll be temporary. I assume that we'll start to hear about the platforms coming back online as long as as long as the storage facilities, I think, can accept it. I know there is some concern that there may be damage or flooding to some of the storage facilities. So as long as that's okay, I assume production will be back. It's refineries that could be the real issue. Then and with I mean, I think Louisiana has like 3 million barrels a day of total refining capacity in Louisiana, and like 2 million of that is offline right now, I think. So
85% or something like that.
Yeah,
basically all of it.
Something close. So I think that that's probably going to be the issue. And I know that the loop, the offshore export terminal, was also taken offline, in preparation. So I think it makes sense that oil's gone back down, because production will probably come back online soon. But, we're definitely going to be seeing some weird numbers, I think, with the IEA data for the coming weeks. And there's a lot that's not known about when this refining stuff's coming back. I mean, I know the Exxon Mobil refinery in Baton Rouge just said that they haven't really sustained any damage, but they can't come back online. And in fact, they're shutting more down because they're not getting feedstock, but also because they need support from utilities, and like no one has power in like the state of Louisiana.
Yeah, yeah, definitely down there in the toe of the boot, they're all out, and so but it doesn't seem, from what I've read though, that the damage was, they're predicting this. Well, it's going to be worse than Katrina as far as the size of the storm. I know they had a pretty big storm surge, but overall, it doesn't seem like the damage. And I'm grading this based upon how the headlines work, which is after a major event, if there's a lot of damage, there's headlines galore. If there's not a lot of damage, the headlines kind of go away. So there is some damage, but it doesn't seem to be catastrophic. It's not Harvey or something like that, or Katrina,
Yeah.
or whatever.
But yeah, I think that the big issue is that in Katrina, the levees failed, and so they just flooded the place. And it seems that at least the billions and billions of dollars that they spent, upgrading the levees was a good investment because it hasn't, you've got a lot of wind damage. Obviously, I mean, there were pictures of like roofs and buildings are gone and trees are everywhere, and that's par for the course with a hurricane. But and I think the biggest issue is a big like power transmission line that goes like it like fell into the Mississippi River or something like that, and that's a huge issue in terms of getting power back. But like it's going to be a big cleanup, and there's definitely flooding. But like the fact that like they didn't need that like a levee didn't break, or like in Houston didn't they like deliberately flood part of the city to relieve pressure? So the fact that we're not seeing that definitely means it's like not as bad. I do think also, at least, and I'm not a meteorologist, but when I was like looking at the comparisons between Katrina and Ida, it seemed like with Katrina, the way that Katrina hit the area, they experienced a huge amount of rain prior to like the like really like the core of the hurricane hitting, and that can cause like even worse effects. Whereas with Ida, it seemed like they didn't. Maybe it just hadn't like rotated the right way or something, but it seemed like the winds really came first, and then the rain and the storm surge. And I know at least around here, if you get a lot of rain before the winds hit, that causes even more trees to fall and stuff. So that's my amateur meteorologist
there it is.
Take.
And more from Dr. Andrew at 5.
Yeah. Can I just say, when I was a kid, I really did want to be like one of those like local weather people who like like stands outside in the snow and they're like, and at 5 we're gonna measure the snow, and hey, it's windy out here. I that was like my dream job when I was
I tell you, okay, so
11.
Here's an opportunity. So Josh and I were talking this morning on the Texas Long podcast. I said the next time that they have a hurricane, I want to go down there. I was watching some of those people live streaming the, like in their cars or whatever. So I want to go down to one and just like drive around in it for a day or two, or, a couple hours, whatever it is, while it's going on, and just live stream. I think that'd be pretty fun. So, so there's your invite.
It would be wild.
But I think the larger point is, so even if you have a down power line over the river and you have some stuff here, you don't have the catastrophic wide sprawling, and so you can focus your repair efforts more more narrowly based on certain areas. And so, like with Katrina and Harvey, you just have people that are stranded in their homes. You have flooding issues that are beyond the norm.
Yeah.
To your point, the wind damage. So all that. So if the normal damage is there, which is not good, but it's par for the course, that's one thing. And so that allows you to kind of clean up and repair the things that need to get the power back on. If you have this kind of widespread, just everyone's out and your people are stranded in their homes, then you really can't focus your efforts on anything. So I think we kind of came out unscathed from that standpoint. Would be my larger takeaway. And if you look at let's see here, we got one on the Colonial Pipeline. They're expecting, I think, to get back today or tomorrow, right? So they're looking at, they think things can get back up. Is there another pipeline other than the Nord Stream 2 that makes more news
than Colonial? I mean, for a long time, it was the pipeline that didn't exist, Keystone XL. I would say the only other pipeline that gets a lot is like Enbridge or what was the one in North Dakota? DAPL. DAPL. That got but Colonial.
Colonial's the only one working.
Well, apparently Enbridge is going to get approval to, I think, really soon to do its expansion, which is a big deal because the governor of Michigan tried really, really hard to force them to truck that oil over the river. I mean, the lake. But yeah, so Colonial Pipeline temporarily is halting deliveries from Houston to Greensboro. So I'm sure that will cause some spike in gasoline prices, in those areas. But it should be back online pretty soon, unless they're like lying and it's actually another cyber attack.
That would be weird.
I made that up, by the way. It's not like I've heard any news about
No, I
that.
know,
It
but that
just
would
like
be
occurred to me.
that'd be like the perfect storm to use a
I see what you did there.
yeah. Yeah, it's just weird that Colonial is, but it also goes to show you how important the Colonial is to the gasoline on the East Coast, right? And so, it gets a lot of coverage because it's kind of the main one driving the fuel out that way. And the other thing I would say is on that is that assuming it opens back up, everything gets flowing again. Um, you said the storage on the refineries with the water was the other concern.
Yeah,
How
it was.
good?
Oh, I was saying, so like a lot of these storage facilities have these like floating tops.
Hmm.
So like they pump oil and the top goes up. And so I think that there was some concern because there was a lot of oil storage on the coastline right where the hurricane actually hit, and they want to make sure that like that's you don't have an oil leak or anything like that. And so my thought was that, well, if they're pumping oil, out of the ocean and then it's going to these storage facilities before it goes elsewhere or whatnot. I don't know. Maybe they're just waiting, maybe their storage facilities where it's come from like Cushing and they're waiting to send it to China or whatnot, but that could be an issue because when you have like a kink in one part of the whole like process, if there's a kink in the midstream, then it can affect how the upstream and the downstream function. Another interesting issue is, so we've seen a lot of like very high levels of gasoline demand this year, but we are coming to the end of summer driving season, and a lot of refineries go offline in September and October for regularly scheduled maintenance. And so either it's possible that we might not have as bad an effect as we would have with these refineries offline, or maybe what if these refineries are off? What if there is damage to some of these, to a significant number of these refineries, and they do go offline, and then other refineries can't go offline for their scheduled maintenance? That could cause some issues down the road. Just kind of speculating here.
That's possible, but we've talked on the podcast a few times about this hurricane season, and we haven't had any real major hurricanes that have impact refineries. And so, if this is the only one we have, then I think we'll be doing all right.
Apparently, they're expecting another like a really big hurricane to form in the Atlantic, but it's gonna just like go up into the Atlantic.
Is there the makings of one, or are they like global warming, like we're due?
No. These are like the people who like forecast hurricanes.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. I follow this guy, Joe Bastardi, mostly because he used to be on like the radio where I was growing up in Philadelphia. Would hear him like Joe Bastardi on KYW News Radio. Now he does his own weather thing called Weather Bell, but he's been really, really accurate about hurricanes and like where they're going to hit and predicting that. He's like, it's so I always like follow him when it comes to hurricanes, and he was saying earlier, like today, and this was echoed by some other people I follow in terms of hurricanes, who said that it definitely looks like there's going to be another storm, but it's going to stay far away, like a major hurricane in the Atlantic. He says a major Atlantic hurricane will develop late next week and stay out at sea, which is kind of interesting. I mean, obviously that's an issue for the people out at sea, but hopefully not for us.
Did you see the picture of the plane that the planes that fly into the hurricane? Did you see those pictures?
Oh my God. I don't know how those people do that. That is so terrifying.
Yeah, I don't either. But the pictures are unreal. And so, yeah, just and they have the prop planes. I guess that's part of the thing because it's not like the turbojet engine; it's the actual props. And you would think, I don't know if on a prop plane in a hurricane, but they do. So I don't know. It's big props, obviously. It's not little ones.
Yeah.
Comment here: maybe affected refiners should just go straight to maintenance.
It's possible as long as they're scheduled for maintenance. Like, what if Port Arthur is scheduled for maintenance and Baton Rouge isn't? So yeah, I mean, I think that they've done that in the past, but it's kind of an issue. I mean, though generally, we do see that gasoline demand does drop, especially after Labor Days, like next week. After that, we generally see a drop off in gasoline demand.
Okay. All right. Let's talk now about OPEC Plus. We mentioned them briefly, but according to Platts, OPEC Plus faces mixed market signals after U.S. pressure to increase oil supplies. Now, I meant to look this up. I saw this last night when I was doing something, or this morning, and I got distracted. Is it true that the U.S. got removed from the EU's safe fly list? Is that true?
I'm not sure if they did, but they're definitely considering, restricting travel from the U.S. I definitely saw that. Yeah, that the EU is again gonna like say, "Oh no, U.S., you're dirty Corona people. We can't have you come to Europe."
Let me look it up real quick because if that's true, I'll put EU block EU. Let's see here. Yeah, European Union. Yeah, here it is. 2 days ago, the headline from Forbes: European Union to remove the U.S. from its safe travel list. Amid American travelers in Europe may soon face additional COVID-related restrictions, such as quarantines and testing requirements. Okay, so if that's what's going on there, that's going to be more than anything. Interesting. This is we talk about can't get the economy things going because you have stuff like this up down, forward backwards. And it's just, anyways. Sorry,
It's like a never-ending like loop.
But that's you talk about these mixed signals. This is part of the mixed signals, right? Which
Yep.
is things are moving forward, and then oh no, we're not. Then we're moving forward. Oh no, we're not. So what is OPEC Plus to do?
Yeah. Well, there were some like interesting, headlines yesterday because there was some confusion over what the Kuwaitis actually did say. But apparently, it seemed like the Kuwaiti minister was saying something like, "Well, OPEC Plus might reconsider its output increase," which basically OPEC has this deal. They're supposed to increase production 400,000 barrels a day. Every month. So I think if they're meeting September 1st, they're going to be talking about the increase for October.
Mm-hmm.
I think the September increase is happening like tomorrow or
2 days.
Yeah. It's I mean, they can't. I'm pretty sure they're talking. They usually talk about what's going to happen the next month. So that's what they're talking about. And so like back when oil prices were dropping, there were these like rumbles and headlines, and it was like OPEC could consider not doing this, and people were like, well, is that coming from OPEC? And that wasn't actually coming from OPEC. It was coming from analysts who were basically saying like, well, given that this is happening, OPEC might be considering this, which is a fair statement to make because like if you are in the mind of the OPEC ministers, you might be thinking like, yeah, they may be reconsidering this. But I think a lot of people interpreted that as they had like inside information about what OPEC was actually doing, and they weren't. So then Kuwait comes out and says, it says the increase in oil output agreed to last month could be reconsidered at the meeting. Basically, they said the markets are slowing since COVID-19 has begun its fourth wave in some areas. We must be careful and reconsider this increase. There may be a halt to the 400,000 barrel per day increase. But now they had people going out and talking to the actual delegates who are saying, like, we're not considering that.
How much of this confusion is because it's being translated and there's also translation, or how much of it is they're being kind of intentionally vague? Any read on that?
I think some of it was a translation issue, and some of it is also intentionally vague. And like, there also OPEC always does these things. They want to put out, well, what if we have the Kuwaiti minister say this to the press? Or Kuwait's like, oh, let me say this and see if it jacks prices up. Like there's always like every time they meet, this stuff comes up.
Right.
I think it's unlikely that they're gonna do a pause because even with the kind of like, I don't know, could you call it a correction? Maybe it was kind of a correction that we saw. Still, like Brent is over 70, and I doubt that they would seriously reconsider it unless they saw Brent going like close to 60. I think they'd have to really come down for them to seriously reconsider this. But also, remember, they like to be all technocratic and stuff, and so OPEC, the organization, makes its own, predictions and forecasts and stuff, and they haven't changed their demand forecast. The IEA changed its demand forecast, lowered its demand forecast for 2021 because of the new COVID stuff, whatever. but the EIA and OPEC have not. And I think that that's significant. If OPEC was to come out and revise its demand forecast for the rest of the year, then I think it would be a more likely situation that OPEC could maybe either do less of an increase or suspend an increase or something like that. That's my read.
Your read is there's mixed signals.
Mixed signals.
No, I mean it's the most appropriate headline ever. Well, okay, at least that part of it is that it's mixed signals because there is if you look around globally, there are a lot of things happening that do not get a lot of press coverage. I'm talking about the protests that are going on all over the place, and how does that play out like that? And that doesn't get a lot of media coverage, but I'm talking about New York City, France, Australia. I mean, like all over the world. And so, do those die down? Do those pick up? Do those get more violent, less violent? I'm not trying to. I don't know. And so, but those things could spiral out of control if we're not careful. And so then that could impact how governments respond. So I think mixed signals is the nice way to put it. The other thing is, you saw the Supreme Court that ruled that the housing moratorium evictions is over. So I'm assuming we're going to start seeing that. Well, that's going to send signals to the market too when people start getting evicted.
Yeah.
Start going, oh, whoa, people are getting evicted. What's going on here, right? And so there's all kinds of signals that are being sent.
Yeah, I definitely agree. The only not mixed signal is that the Fed wants to keep pumping up the stock market.
Well, obviously that's the one consistent thing is the Fed's doing that. Okay, here we go. It's interesting. There were massive protests all over the world before COVID hit. I don't. Okay. Well, hold on. On some level, there's always protests going on about something.
Yeah.
But I don't think. So in France, or they get that with the yellow jackets or whatever, they're always protesting.
Yeah, that was a big protest. I mean, those were quite violent too. The yellow. Yeah, but now I think that it's particular that we're seeing, but those got a lot of media coverage.
Right.
I think it's particular that we're seeing protests that aren't getting any global coverage at all. I mean, there have been protests all over France, real protests. There was a protest in New York City that the other day that did not look small at all. I mean, what is it like? You don't get coverage unless you bash store windows open and steal sneakers.
Yeah, and that's what makes it hard to know is what's going on here. The Antifa stuff is still going on. Oh, by the way, so that's still going on. I do think that there was before COVID a general consensus worldwide that the people at the top were screwing around the people at the bottom, and they didn't like that. So that was kind of going on. But we're just, as much as we want to say things might be close to normal, whatever, we're just in a different world now. And so.
There's no way things are close to normal when you have to show your ID and your paper or whatever to eat at a restaurant in New York City.
Right.
I'm sorry. That's not normal.
Right. And so, anyways, so yeah, so I how long those protests last and stuff, I think is a problem. But then if you talk about, New Zealand or Australia, as we have, if they keep locking down and opening up and locking down and opening up, and we're not back to normal. So, Okay, let's see here. I think we have time for one more before.
Yes, this is a good article.
From the Wall Street Journal, climate change to be treated as a public. I can't read the rest of the hell.
Public health issue. Oh yeah, who said that was coming? Last year.
That's the one, the only.
Oh yeah, but this is actually kind of amusing. I think a lot of people only read the headline. They're like, that means more lockdowns. Okay, so they're starting in the Department of Health and Human Services. They've launched a new department called the Office of Climate Change and Health Equity. Its mission is to protect the health of people experiencing a disproportionate share of climate impacts and health inequities, from wildfires to drought to hurricanes to floods. Okay. Guess what they are actually doing? Their first order of business is the first task would be to take accounting of the greenhouse gas emissions from various parts of the healthcare sector. So their first order of business is actually to go after the healthcare sector for too much greenhouse gas emissions. They also said they won't yet have specific goals for the reduction in emissions they want from healthcare facilities.
Well,
I'm not sure that lockdowns are the first thing on their minds. Apparently, they want to go after hospitals for, I mean, what are the big greenhouse? The thing that came to my mind was the obscene use of like single-use plastics, right? I mean, like hospitals probably generate more plastic waste than anywhere else. And we know from our wonderful conversations with Dr. Dean Foreman that single-use plastic consumption is way up since the pandemic, to the extent that you can actually see it in the plastics, in the numbers in the plastics production, industry in the U.S., and that has been going strong, and like it shows no signs of abating. So maybe if they want to look in terms of like where they can reduce greenhouse gas emissions, they should be talking about the use, the incredible like waste that these hospitals produce, and how they could reduce that or reduce the environmental impact of that and the greenhouse gas emissions that are produced when they produce these plastics.
Okay, very good.
Not that the office of whatever is asking me, but.
And I see our guest has arrived, so let's bring him on. There he is. Patrick, can you hear us, sir?
I can.
Good. Patrick,
excellent. Welcome back.
buddy. Good to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you can find him at Gas Buddy Guy on Twitter. Patrick, it's good to have you on. I'm sure there's nothing going on in your world today, so
got all the jokes today, right? This is perfect timing when we scheduled this.
I know, we're like, wow, this worked out good for us, probably terrible for you. So we talked about Colonial Pipeline a minute ago. What's going on with gas prices, gas outages, shortages down in New Orleans and the Gulf Coast area?
Sounds good.
Yeah. So what do you guys see?
Tell us.
Yeah.
What's the latest?
Oh boy, there's a lot going on. Of course, Hurricane Ida is now kind of dominating conversations, but of course, we're still in this COVID era. We've made a tremendous recovery this summer in terms of gasoline demand, and perhaps surprisingly, this Delta variant, though it surged, and of course, oil markets remain a little bit rattled by the prospects of global demand that could start to go back down. The driving season has remained fairly resilient. Americans really showing no signs of slowing down consumption. Now, of course, we are starting to enter into a period of time that we see seasonal demand moving lower, and now that has been the case. Demand is slipping slightly over the last couple of weeks as we enter the closing innings of the driving season. But I think initially when we started the year, what we saw play out would have been the best expectation or the best possible outcome. And so demand has remained fairly strong. In fact, the EIA's implied demand last week still pretty high at 9.57 million. I think our data thinks it's a little bit lower than that, somewhere in the 9.3s. But yeah, to start the year with the demand that was probably south of 7.5 million barrels a day to make this jump, it's been pretty remarkable.
That's great news. I know last week we were talking about whether we thought that the Delta variant had impacted gasoline consumption in the southern areas of the U.S. and whether as it moves north, there's this expectation that these Delta waves may hit the Northeast. Would we see a kind of corresponding drop in gasoline demand? So it seems what you're saying is that it didn't really impact gasoline demand in the South.
It really didn't. I mean, looking at some of the biggest consuming states, Texas and Florida, remarkably, Texas has not seen the surge that Florida has, but Florida demand hasn't really taken much of a slide. Americans resilient, just refusing to give up the closing innings of summer. We lost last summer, and now people, they're on either side of the fence. They're either vaccinated and going about their lives, or they're not, and they're going about their lives. So the fact that COVID has surged in the South doesn't appear to have made a dent in demand. And I think the biggest part of that too is that government is not stepping in this time around. I mean, even wherever you are on the political spectrum, I don't think there's any real travel restrictions that would impede and keep people from moving.
Yeah, maybe other than airplane restrictions or Hawaii.
That's right. Yeah. International travel restrictions, but, and that's keeping Americans home. And now, timely. Now the EU is reimposing travel restrictions on travelers from the U.S. But, if anything, that's going to keep it very busy here on the nation's roads here. If people have no alternatives, they want to get out and they can't do it elsewhere, they're going to do it here at home. And I mean, looking at some of the outdoor places, Yellowstone National Park, their best July on record. There's no reason to expect that it would go down any bit for August.
So
That's true.
If I'm hearing you correctly, then the news over the past few months hasn't really impacted demand either. So if you hear about, cases surging, the demand staying high, regardless of how people are consuming the news, they're going to do what they're going to do, and that's what the numbers are reflecting. And so we've talked on the show about the uncertainty and the mixed signals that are being sent, but you're saying that that's really not impacted how gasoline consumption is being distributed.
Yeah, at least in the U.S. I mean, the U.S. has seen a lot of hesitation to reimposing travel restrictions. You look at countries like Asia though, like China and Australia, New Zealand. Australia, I think, is now giving up on keeping COVID-19 away. But other countries, global demand, it's a different story. But at least in the U.S., there hasn't really been much to impede demand this summer.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Now, now that we've seen this hurricane, let's kind of shift gears and talk a little bit about what we can expect in terms of gasoline from Hurricane Ida. I do have one question that I was hoping that you could answer, because this has actually been bothering me for many years, since I first moved to Florida and experienced my first hurricane situation, which is, so why do gasoline stations, when the power is out, so they might have gasoline, but you can't use it because the power is out, why don't they have their own generators?
Well, I mean, that was a contentious debate. That's gone through Florida legislators. Stations didn't want to be required to have generators. The law, I believe, in Florida is they have to have hookups for generators, but the burden was too significant to have permanent generators installed. So I believe Florida's requirement is they have to have the hookup, but they don't have to have an actual generator on site. So, a little bit of a difference, and that's where some of the interest groups may, push back against some of these somewhat burdensome rules. I mean, generators are not cheap, especially ones that could power stations in an emergency. And I think that's where the pushback came from gas stations, is that, cutthroat profits at the pump. You're talking about potentially a 5-figure generator required for what may amount to a couple of days a year of use.
That's very interesting. Thank you for clearing that up. I've been wondering this. And the great thing I like about the Gas Buddy app is that when you're looking for a gas station, you can see whether it has both fuel and or power. So very, very useful, having driven up to stations with no power before. Very useful. So thank you for that explanation.
It's really nice to be able to come in service when you're trying to get out of harm's way. Hopefully you were one of those that were reporting updates as you went along. And of course, many of those tools are powered by, just everyday motorists that like to help out others.
So,
for sure.
What are we seeing? You were talking about the damage that were, at least the early reports. It doesn't feel like it's, widespread flooding like a Harvey or Katrina. No levees are being, major levees that burst. But as far as the gasoline demand that you guys see from hurricane to hurricane, is this kind of normal par for the course? People that have been moving out, driving out and coming back in. What have you seen from that perspective?
Well, there are certainly outages, especially along the evacuation routes in Louisiana. Even up until an hour ago, I was almost wondering if the market was kind of underestimating the downtime. And then talking to some refiners here in the last little bit, it feels like there's growing contention and growing frustration. Refineries may be down for quite some time without power. Of course, we've seen those pictures, New Orleans, the entire city without power. I think that can't be understated now is we don't really know if we're going to measure power outages in hours, days, weeks, or months. Really, at this point, there's so much infrastructure down there that's down for the count. A lot of these refineries are now down as a result of that, and there's been a lot of frustration that I've heard that there's no RVP waiver yet, and we're talking about several of the nation's largest refineries being down. You have to wonder. RVP waivers seem to be given out like candy in the past so easily for smaller storms. Now we have a bigger event where there are concerns that there might be long-term outages, and yet the EPA has not provided an RVP waiver.
Really, and that's for flaring, correct?
An RVP waiver would allow refiners to sell and distribute gasoline that would be used
Okay.
in about 2 weeks' time. So
It's for the fall blend.
that's right.
Yeah.
The summer versus
Okay.
winter blend, essentially the reed vapor pressure has to be under 9 pounds during the summer, and that's regulated through September 15th. So a waiver would allow them to make that transition earlier, essentially widening the amount of gasoline supply that's available.
And it's very surprising that they wouldn't issue this even in advance of the hurricane, because we knew that there were going to be, the refineries were shutting down. It's also very, that's a very odd thing not to do, especially considering that it does seem like the Biden administration is more concerned now with rising gasoline prices. I mean, we've certainly seen some. I think there was another memo issued today by the FTC saying that they're going to look at potentially illegal mergers of E&P companies. I read that as hey, we're trying to bring your gas prices down, but this would obviously be something that would really help people in the immediate sense. So hopefully that will come
there's
true.
not even necessarily that much effort to do that, and like you said, it's a little bit ironic that the Biden administration would request from OPEC additional crude oil, but not do anything to keep gas prices down by issuing a waiver in light of a major and catastrophic hurricane.
Yeah. Well, maybe someone at the EPA is listening and will hear this
that
issue.
waiver is now working its way down the pipeline.
Right? What about any issues in terms of that you've been seeing in terms of how will this affect the storage facilities? So we know, like, if refineries can't get supplies or can't process them, but we see Gulf of Mexico production coming back online, what's there's going to be some sort of a backlog, and what can we expect to see in terms of numbers there?
Well, there's so many bottlenecks right now in place of IDA. Now that IDA's moved out, all of these different bottlenecks at various levels are going to persist for probably days. And getting it sorted out, I mean, wow, talk about a mess trying to figure it out. Refineries needing power, they need nitrogen, oxygen, steam power. So many different things have to happen in order. And we could see some pretty sizable inventory draws in Pad 3 in the weeks ahead. We could also, to that point, also see crude oil inventories swelling because refineries are offline. So, and then, to add in the situation that Pad 1 inventories, I think, are double digits percent-wise below normal for this time of year. I think gasoline in Pad 1 is below the 5-year range right now. Combined with the fact that Colonial, at least temporarily, it has shut down lines 1 and 2 from Houston to Greensboro, North Carolina. There's also, keep in mind, the pipeline that picks back up in Greensboro and runs to Linden, New Jersey. This could also squeeze Pad 1 gasoline inventories without that relief mechanism.
Sounds like it's going to be a real mess.
Certainly, I don't envy the situation that refineries are in and distributors in the East Coast or even in the Gulf Coast. And, to that point, we're seeing the basis differential, even in Chicago, make a notable jump, implying that gasoline from the Great Lakes may start heading south or east to make up for the gaps that both of those regions could be facing in the days and weeks ahead.
Now that's pretty impressive. I mean, we do certainly have ways to accommodate, but with the trucking shortages that we've been seeing, it seems like it will be very difficult to accommodate for this. Do you think that we'll start to see more imports of gasoline and other products into the U.S.?
Without a question, I think even before the storm was well formed, we were already seeing inbound gasoline deliveries to Pad 1, and I think that's only going to accelerate, especially now that Louisiana, some of the nation's biggest refineries, are offline. I think that's certainly going to fetch a lot of additional cargoes to alleviate the situation, and expect to see some of those tanker trackers a little bit busy with all the diversions that could take place on cargoes that are already moving towards the U.S. There could be a lot of funny movements, products blending components, as well as refineries in the Gulf Coast kind of deal with these challenges.
And on top of that, we're seeing some more issues in Mexico with Pemex's production, which also could cause additional issues there. It seems like all of North America is, other than Canada, is kind of
just very much disorganized, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And of course, the market does tend to work these things out, but, the dislocations can sometimes be severe. And also we can see them in the numbers. I mean, how many weeks do you think that we will be seeing the effects of this in the EIA data?
Boy, at least I would say several, maybe 3 or 4, maybe even beyond that, really dependent on some of these damage assessments and these power restorations. And we just have no idea when some of these refineries will be able to get back online. It could be a couple of weeks before refineries get back online. And then you talk about the abnormal flows as refineries, get back online, that could start happening. So potentially at least 3, maybe 4 weeks, but a lot of it really contingent on exactly how long it takes refineries to get products start churning back out, and how long, pipelines like the Colonial, which shut down preventatively before this, how long it takes them to get back online. There's going to be a lot of abnormalities as a result of this for quite some time. But again, after Hurricane Katrina back in 2005, I think we had probably several months of data that was, kind of oddball, wonky data as a result of all the unique flows after Katrina.
It's just interesting because so many people kind of, there's always market movement based on the EIA data, and people may misinterpret, what they're seeing as part of, say, a larger trend in gasoline demand, when actually it's just very distorted from the hurricane. So I always like to warn people that, you may be seeing this, and it's good to have a sense of how long we may be seeing these distortions go for.
There's certainly some big caveats the next few weeks.
So we got school season starting up. Last year, a lot of schools were closed or halfway open or some open and all over the board. When we look at the numbers going into this year, what do we expect to see? Have you guys, because it's kind of hard to measure things in a post-2020 world because, as you mentioned earlier, the numbers are so skewed. So what should we expect as we go into summer season is ending, but then school season, should we expect kind of historical numbers going back to where they were? Will we see the drop be more than it was? And I can't speak. Will the drop be more than normally is? Where should it be at?
It's tough to know because a lot of the return to school also reflects a return to a commute, right? Parents drop their kids off and go to work, and the commute still is in shambles. A lot of companies delaying their return to office, but they still may have to drop the kids off. And because of the trucker shortage, which, by the way, bus drivers need CDLs, they could get pulled in another direction. So there could be some funkiness there. That is, some bus drivers may not come back. They may have moved on or something else because, of course, last year most schools were at home. And so there's a lot of lumpiness to the return to school systems. Now, many of them have reopened, but again, and parents may actually be bringing their kids more often than school buses are running. And we saw some of that. Some of the Monday demand numbers in the last couple of weeks have really picked up at the cost of declining other days. So it's hard to parse that out since it's only late August, and certainly some school systems have not yet returned. But it'll be interesting seeing if that big increase Monday continues, if that's a sign that parents are bringing their kids to school on Monday. It's hard to know, right? There's not really a normal anymore in this post-COVID or COVID world.
Yeah, and that's kind of my final question. I'll give Ellen the last word to this, but you talked about the demand being back over the summer. How much of that was just pent-up vacation demand versus we've seen the headlines of some companies are making employees come back, some are not. Any read on how much that was just people going back to commuting versus vacations?
If I had to guess, I'd probably say somewhere in the range of 500,000 to 1 million barrels a day of gasoline consumption was just pent up. The fact that people didn't have a destination last summer and they were kind of hell bent on getting out this summer. I think quite a bit of it was pent up demand.
Okay, Ellen, last question for you.
Gosh, I don't know. Just tell anything else that we haven't asked that you might want to add for our listeners.
Well, it's going to be interesting seeing the months ahead. I mean, obviously, there's been a huge surge in the amount of Delta COVID-19 cases, and countries are reacting differently. President Biden had asked OPEC to increase production, and I don't know, the timing was right at the height of demand, and now demand has started to go down. Oil prices have gone down. My question is, will OPEC actually cut production in light of being concerned that oil prices could slump, that the number of Delta COVID cases could surge? I mean, I was kind of surprised when they said they were going to raise production as much every month through 2022. OPEC has been very careful and cautious, and it's almost like I'm waiting to see if they're going to stick to the plan or if they're going to deviate, because you look at the way things are slowing down a bit, and of course we're seeing the close to the U.S. summer driving season, which the U.S. is the world's largest consumer. I think the biggest question is, will OPEC stay the course on resuming production?
Okay, and Patrick, people can download the app in iTunes, Android, wherever they can get mobile apps from. And the line that you left us with last time, I'll never forget this, and it was, when you have to go number 2, you want to know who is number 1. That line has stuck with me since your last appearance. I thought it was a great line. So not only is it gas, it's other types of gas and all kinds of stuff. So it's good to get you on.
Any way you slice it, yeah. Thanks for having me.
All right, at Gas Buddy Guy on Twitter. Go download the Gas Buddy app, especially if you're in one of these hurricane areas or tornado or kind of frenzy looking for gas. These are the people who can help you out. Patrick, thank you so much.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
All right, Dr. Wald. Let's see here. What else do we have before we go? Anything else that we need to get to?
Gosh, I think we've covered just about everything. Yeah. I don't know. I think it was very, very interesting. I learned a lot. I think something to keep an eye on is definitely those waivers from the EPA. I think people talk a lot about waiving the Jones Act, because that's always very important for Florida, because Florida gets all of its gasoline, or most of its gasoline, by a barge. But you do really need to think about that waiver. And I mean, come on, it's only 15 days.
Right. Right. Well, yeah. No, it's bureaucracy. So, okay. All right. Where will you be this week, Dr. Wald?
This week, let's see. On Wednesday, I will be on Bloomberg TV to discuss OPEC and whatever it decides to do. And earlier today, I was on TD Ameritrade, which was an interesting segment about oil and what to look like. And I'll be on investing.com as well.
Okay. Inside the War Room, I had on Mark Rossano. Last week, I have on John Ziegler coming out tomorrow. And then tomorrow, I get to record with the one, the only, the queen of Tigers herself, Carol Baskin. So we'll be doing that tomorrow. And so that's where I will be. And with that, we're back next week, right? We're doing a show next week, aren't we?
Yeah, next week, next Monday.
Be back next week and talk to everyone then.
Bye.